Adams Archive.
So there's that summary. Let's move on. So it says that, and actually we should probably go to the bottom here, because one thing that I found to be unique in this document is that they, in the National Terrorist Advisory Bulletins, they used to say the full words. What you'll find in this document is they use all of these acronyms to try and make it so that you can't screenshot this and post it without context. So what you'll see is there's these DVE, the HVEs, the FTOs, all of these specific acronyms. So I'm going to show you first what those acronyms mean, and then we'll go back to the portion that I just had up there for you. And here they are. Okay, definitions and contextual notes. An FTO is a is a foreign terrorist terrorist organization. So FTO, foreign terrorist. DVE, domestic violent extremist. Okay, so let's look at the definition of that, which it says is an individual. So a domestic violent extremist, a DVE, is an individual based and operating primarily within the United States or its territories without direction or inspiration from a foreign domestic or a foreign terrorist group or other foreign power who seeks to further political or social goals wholly or in part through unlawful acts. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. It's early in the morning. Unlawful acts of force or violence. The mere advocacy of political and social positions, political activism, or use of strong language and rhetoric, or generalized philosophic embrace of violent tactics alone does not constitute violent extremism and may be constitutionally protected. Maybe? Oh, you think that the advocacy of political and social positions or political activism or use of strong rhetoric? Yeah, that is absolutely protected under the Constitution. May be constitutionally protected. DVEs can fit within one or multiple categories of ideological motivation and can span a broad range of groups or movements. INA utilizes this term synonymously with domestic terrorist. So the mere advocacy may be constitutionally protected, but we're still going to label you as a violent extremist. And they may still use the word domestic terrorist. So this is important when we go back and we look at the conversations that we're having. Now, when we look at HVE, the HVE is homegrown violent extremist, is a person of any citizenship who has lived or operated primarily in the United States or its territories who advocates, is engaged in, or is preparing to engage in ideologically motivated terrorist activities, including providing support to terrorism, in furtherance of political or social objectives promoted by a foreign terrorist organization, but is acting independently of direction by a foreign terrorist organization. HVEs are distinct from traditional domestic terrorists who engage in unlawful acts of violence to intimidate civilian populations or attempt to influence domestic policy without direction or influence from a foreign actor. Okay, so they're saying these people have opinions, right? They haven't, the word violence is not in any of these things. Like there's who engage in unlawful acts of violence to intimidate civilian populations. Okay, so there's one mention of violence. Throughout that entire definition, you do not have to be violent. You do not have to be extremist. You have to hold an ideology that they don't like, which may be constitutionally protected to fall into one of these two categories. Now, it also defines conspiracy theorist or a conspiracy theory. So Homeland Security defines a conspiracy theory, which is defined as a subset of narratives in which the ultimate cause of an event is believed to be due to a malevolent plot by multiple actors working together or as an effort to explain some event or practice by reference to the machinations of powerful people who attempt to conceal their role, or at least until their aims are accomplished, as per the National Counterterrorism Innovation, Technology and Education Center, a DHS Center of Excellence. DHS does not hold a position on the veracity of the claims associated with these theories. So what they're saying is, if you believe there's any number of group of people who is trying to conceal their identity that has worked together to cause an event, that is a conspiracy theory. And we can write you off, and we can put you into a document where we can now put you on a list. Crazy. This is their definition of a conspiracy theory. So if you hold the belief that any number of people, 3, 4, 5 powerful people, did anything to cause an event and then tried to conceal their position during that event, which has happened always, forever, in history, in every event, then you are now considered a conspiracy theorist. And now that becomes important, right? This isn't just conspiracy theory in your bio, right? This is important because then they can utilize this document and say, here's how we're going to weaponize the Department of Justice against you. So now that we have that background, let's go back up to the document. All right, so terrorism. So it says that so there's some foreign stuff, there's some domestic stuff. I'm just going to walk you through line by line in the document. Some of the foreign stuff, it says foreign terrorist organization inspired homegrown violent extremists. So inspired by terrorists, but homegrown will remain high, right? So homegrown violent extremists remain high. The threat will continue to be characterized primarily by lone offenders or small cells motivated to violence by a combination of racial, religious, gender, or anti-government grievances, conspiracy theorists, and personalized factors. We are particularly concerned about the likelihood of violent motivation by developing domestic and global events, including the 2024 election cycle and the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. So what you have to notice there is when they say conspiracy theorists, and then they say the election cycle, right? If you say anything about the election not being fair, not being right, not being accurate, you can now be labeled a homegrown violent extremist because that can be tied to some bigger plot, even if you have no violent actions. Because what you have to understand about this document and why this document's important is because what they're essentially establishing is the ground rules for their organization. The ground rules for if you say this, right? If you say this thing, if you say this, we think you're going to this. So we're going to do this, right? That if you think or say this, we think that you're going to do this. And so we can do all of this to stop you, even though you didn't do any of it yet. Preemptively or reasonable belief, right? Words are important. So when you understand that they can use anything within their power, if they can label you as this DVE or HVE, the domestic violent extremist or homegrown violent extremist. The second that you say anything about one of these things, right? Global events like the election cycle, right? Talking about things like conspiracy theorists where people plot to do bad things like they always have. Gender ideology, racial, political, right? I like how they include gender in there. Like, oh, okay, let's use the Department of Justice and lethal force to protect the trans people because their sexual kinks want them to dress up.
Adams Archive.